and thank you for joining us, all of our friends and family, for the conclusion of our 2021 MLK Day celebration. We hope that you all are at home, cozy, and ready for fun story time. You're in for a special treat. This closing of our family programming for the day is led by Alice Faye Duncan, as she'll read excerpts from her children's book, Memphis, Martin, and the Mountaintop, the Sanitation Workers Strike of 1968, followed by a haiku writing workshop. So I hope you guys have your pens ready or your pencils and your notebooks, and you're excited to get started. And Alice Faye Duncan writes picture books that celebrate unexplored moments in Black history with words and rhythms that swing like music. She writes about the sustaining power of love between Black mothers and their children. How incredible is that? Her books include Honey Baby Sugar Child, Just Like a Mama, Song for Gwendolyn Brooks, and Memphis, Martin, and the Mountaintop, which we're going to hear about today. This book was awarded the 2019 Coretta Scott King Honor Medal. No easy feat. So thank you so much to Miss Alice, who will be leading us today. I hope that you all will enjoy and have fun.
Thank you for inviting me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Storytime with Alice Faye. Today, I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's see if I can do this seamlessly well. It took me a minute. Oh, there it is. Yes. So today, I think that's at the end of my presentation. So we're going to backtrack here. We're going to go all the way back. There we go. And so this is the beginning of our presentation. Thank you, Alexandria, for having me here today. Again, I'm Alice Faye Duncan. I'm the author of the book, Memphis, Martin, and the Mountaintop, the Sanitation Strike of 1968. I know that today we are here to talk about Dr. King and the labor movement. Okay, I know that. We're going to get to that. But before we do, I have a little program or order of programming that I want to share with you. And before we begin, I want to share one quote that comes from not Dr. King, but it comes from his cosmic companion, Coretta Scott King. And Coretta Scott King said that freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. So in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed. We had African Americans were then welcomed into city government. They were welcomed into state government, city municipalities, federal government jobs, right? And so we thought fair housing was then implemented, sort of kind of fair housing, quasi-fair housing was implemented. Equality in education in terms of, equal budgets, Black schools, white schools, right? 1964, they call that the Civil Rights Act, right? And so you would think 1964, the Dr. King and his friends, they marched in 63, they marched in 1955. You would think 1964 with the sign of the Civil Rights Act, hey, we're good. But we're not, because Coretta Scott King is right. In every generation, your generation, my generation, kids from the 1960s, kids from the 1970s, kids from the 80s, kids from the 90s, the new millennials, every generation has a freedom struggle. And each of us has to be a participant as freedom, right? As freedom fighters, as non-violent protesters. All of us have a responsibility to participate in that struggle if freedom is to be maintained. Freedom is just not maintained because people wake up in the morning. You have to work toward freedom being maintained. All right. And so our order of program. I know it's not morning, but I'm going to share with you what could be considered a morning affirmation. I'm going to discuss who Dr. King was. I'm going to discuss how I met Dr. King. Yes, I knew Dr. King. Sort of, kind of. I knew Dr. King. We're going to have a poetry reading. I'm going to talk a short bit about miracles. Expect miracles every day. Expect miracles every single day. If you expect miracles, you will receive them. And then I'm going to end with an evening affirmation. And then we're going to have a gift exchange because it's a holiday. Every holiday requires what? Gifts. Every holiday requires gifts. And Dr. King's birthday is no different. And then if you all have some time left and you want to do a Q&A, we'll do a Q&A as well. So what I say is a morning affirmation, right? Every day needs to begin in a spirit of positivity. So I'm going to teach you an affirmation that you can use in the morning, evening, that you can just use to encourage yourself when you need a pick-me-up, or when you need a boost, or when you need to feel better about the odds that are facing you at that time. So if you would, we're going to do what's called a call and response. Now, I can't hear you. You can hear me, but I can't hear you. But I would like for you, if you would, repeat after me. And so that I look, sometimes my memory fades. So I'm going to read from my paper here. Repeat after me, please. Wherever I sit, wherever I stand, wherever I speak, wherever I am. Touch your heart. Repeat after me again. Wherever I sit, wherever I stand, wherever I speak, wherever I am a gift. I am a blessing. I am the one who makes dreams happen. You are the one who does what? You are the one who makes dreams happen. Wherever you sit, wherever you stand, wherever you speak, wherever you are a gift. You are a blessing. You are the one who makes dreams happen. There is no mistake. There are no mistakes. There are no accidents. Every life that is here today, everyone who is gathered here today, you are here, predestined by providence to be here for good things now and good things to come in the future. And so now we want to talk about who Dr. King is. So when you leave my time today, if you remember nothing else about Dr. King, I want you to remember NPRW. His life stood for three things. He was anti-poverty, anti-racism, and anti-war. His opinion was, Dr. King's opinion was, nobody is free until everybody is free. That was his opinion. So if you remember nothing else, like if someone said, well, what does Dr. King represent? Or what did his life mean? You could say succinctly, he was anti-poverty, he was anti-racism, he was anti-war. Now, is Dr. King your champion? Is Dr. King your hero? If Dr. King is your champion, if Dr. King is your hero, understand that every hero and every champion has a hero and a champion. So Dr. King's hero and champion when he was a child was Harriet Tubman. When he was a little boy, he learned about the courage of Harriet Tubman, and her courage inspired him to also be courageous. And so therefore, today I'm going to teach you a poem, but I need to see your I need to see your participation. So when I raise my hand, I want you to say freedom. When I raise my hand, I don't have to hear you, but I need to see you say freedom.
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 All right, so I'm going to do it again. When I raise my hand, every time I say raise my hand, I need you to say the word freedom.
Freedom.
All right, so now, good. Now I'm going to read for you the poem, Harriet Tubman, because Harriet Tubman was Dr. King's champion. Dr. King is your champion. Harriet Tubman was Dr. King's champion. You will grow up, you will do great things, and you will be someone's champion. And the poem goes like this. Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff.
Freedom.
Wasn't scared of nothing either.
Freedom.
Didn't come in this world to be no slave, and wasn't gonna stay one either.
Freedom.
Farewell, she sang to her friends one night. She was mighty sad to leave them, but she ran away that dark, hot night, ran looking for her freedom. She ran to the woods and ran through the woods with the slave catchers right behind her.
Freedom.
She
Freedom.
kept on running till she got up north where those mean men couldn't find her. 19 times she went back south to get 300 others. She ran for her freedom 19 times to save Black sisters and brothers.
Freedom.
Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff, wasn't scared of nothing neither, didn't come in this world to be no slave. She didn't come in this world to be no slave. She didn't come in this world to be no slave, and she didn't stay one either.
Freedom.
She didn't stay one either.
Freedom.
Thank you. So now what we want to do, look at the question here. It says, who inspires you? So now what I want you to do is, I want you to write the name of 1 or 2 people who inspire you. Who is your champion? Who makes you feel big? Who encourages you? Who loves you? Who supports you? I need you to write that name down, and then we're going to use that name. We're going to use that name later. You can write the first name, or if it's your mom or your dad, you can write mom, or you can write dad, or you can write their actual name, okay?
You're right. You think of who.
All right. So now, can we mute again now? All right. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to introduce you to my book, but I also want to share with you how I met Dr. King. Now, in actuality, I never met Dr. King. Dr. King died in 1968. I was born in 1967. I was 1 year old when Dr. King died, okay? But I live in the city of Memphis where Dr. King was killed. And there are monuments all around the city that reminded me as a child of Dr. King's life. There were people in my neighborhood who marched with Dr. King. And when I was young in the 70s, the conversations at the dinner table, the conversations at church, the conversations at school, because we were in Memphis, those conversations oftentimes, they were about Dr. King and the life he lived. And so I like to say that he so hunted the imagination when I was a child that I felt like I knew him. So this is me when I was in the 3rd grade. And when I was in the 3rd grade, it was one January. The teacher was talking about Dr. King and his birthday. And he so hunted my imagination. He was so a part of my imagination that when the teacher mentioned his name, I raised my hand and I said, hey, you know, Dr. King is a friend of mine. I told the teacher, I know Dr. King. And the teacher looked and she was like, but I know how old you are, kid. She's like, you would have been 1 year old when Dr. King died. So you could not have known Dr. King. But I was like, but he was my friend. He's my friend. Because conversations, again, at home, conversations at church, conversations at school, the teacher was talking about him. I just felt like I was so intimate with him that I knew him. And so when I grew up, became a school teacher, started writing books for kids, I realized something. Nobody that I knew, the children that I was teaching, they did not know Dr. King as well as they thought they knew him. So when I would say, hey, where was Dr. King when he died? Every kid in Memphis could say, the Lorraine Motel. But when I said, why did Dr. King die? Nobody could say, when I would say, why was Dr. King in Memphis? Nobody could say that he was there marching with the AFSCME labor union people. No kid could tell me that he was there marching for economic freedom for those sanitation workers. No kid could say that. All they could say is Dr. King died at the Lorraine Motel. And so I'm here today because I want you to know that if anybody asks you, why was Dr. King in Memphis in 68? I want you to be able to say Dr. King was in Memphis because he was fighting for more money. He was fighting for the green, for the mean green. He was fighting for money, for sanitation workers. And not only that, he was on his way to Washington so that he could propose an economic bill of rights for every American, whites, blacks, browns, everybody who was a full-time worker in the United States. He was going to Washington so that he could propose, someone say it with me, a living wage, so that he could propose a living wage for all Americans. He had moved beyond bus tickets. He had moved beyond coffee counters. It was about a living wage for all Americans. And this is why Dr. King had to die. And this is what Dr. King was doing in Memphis. And guess what? As children now, there's still no living wage in America. And the status quo is trying to keep it that way. But because you are a child and you understand, I hope that my time here allows you to understand that you still now have to fight for freedom and justice and economic rights, that your struggle is not over. There's still not a living wage, and you deserve a living wage. As a child who will be a full-time worker, you deserve a living wage. And so the struggle continues, and your voice is still needed. Even as a little child, your voice is still needed, because freedom has not yet rung. Freedom is not yet here in America completely. There are portions and factions of freedom, but freedom to live and to be a laborer or a worker that is making money, enough money, ample money to take care of a family, to send a child to college, that has not happened yet in America. And so it might be, and if my generation doesn't make it happen, it's going to be your generation that's going to have to make it happen, because the freedom struggle, it remains for every single generation. And so that's why I wrote this book, because I needed children to know. I needed little children your age to understand that economic justice has yet to be made available to everyone in America. And everybody, you all, I mean, you're in California, where it's oftentimes an agriculture region, right? And you know about migrant workers who are not being paid fairly. And just like the sanitation workers, they did not have there were not safety measures in place to keep them safe on the job. Just like oftentimes in agriculture, there are not safety measures in place to keep people safe on the job. Oftentimes in factories, there are not safety measures in place to keep people safe on the job. Say it with me. I've got work to do. You've got work to do. You might be a very small voice. You might be a little bitty wee person right now, but you have work to do. And I hope that my time here makes that very, very clear. So now what we're going to do today is I want you to look at my book cover here. It says Memphis, Martin, and the Mountaintop, the Sanitation Strike of 1968. Who is our main character? Our main character is a little girl, and her name is Lorraine Jackson. My story is told through the eyes of a 9-year-old little girl. And what is the quote? What does the quote say from Dr. King? It says, "For when people get caught up with that which is right and they are willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory." Dr. King also said something when he talked about labor. He says, all labor has worth. Every essential worker has worth. And so we want to remember, we want to celebrate the dignity of every worker also during this day as we discuss Dr. King. Here's a poem. It's the very first poem in my book, Memphis, Martin, and Mountaintop, and it's called Memphis 1968. It actually shares things that happened during the strike, or the things that made the strike so monumental. And that is the fact that when King came to Memphis, 2 men died before. There were more martyrs to the movement than just King. 2 men had already died on garbage trucks because the garbage trucks were not maintained. And at the time, the laborers, the sanitation workers, who were mostly Black, mostly illiterate, they were mostly sharecroppers who had come up from the Mississippi Delta to Memphis to work for the sanitation department, because they did not need degrees, they did not need high school education, and therefore, because they were the least educated, they were the least paid. But if you don't have sanitation workers, there is no, I mean, it's going to be a health crisis. It's going to be a sanitation crisis in your city. So they were being neglected because of their illiteracy when their jobs were, say it with me, most essential. And that's how it often happens. Sometimes the most essential worker is the least paid. Is that fair? It's not. Struggle continues. You have to participate in the struggle, use your voice to speak up for what is right. And I'm now going to read my poem, Memphis, 1968. I remember Memphis, I remember the stinking sanitation strike. Alley cats, rats, and dogs rummaged through piles of trash. Black men marched through Memphis with protest signs raised high. I also marched in 68 with red ribbons in my hair. I remember Memphis and legions of noblemen. I remember broken glass and the voice of a fallen king. Fire, smoke, and ashes ravaged midnight cityscapes. Black men march for honor. And I must tell the story. You must tell the story so that no one will forget it. If we do not remember our history, the history will repeat itself. If we do not remember the egregious and negligent and harmful things that happened in our history, then we will repeat those things that are egregious, that are negligent, that are harmful. And so therefore we have to be very conscientious to do the right thing, to say the right thing, to be kind, to be nice, to be compassionate, to have empathy, to speak up when our voice is needed because no one else will speak up. And therefore, when we think about Memphis, we think about the old men who were sanitation workers, but I also want you to understand that the freedom movement in Memphis in 68 was a family affair. If your dad was striking, that meant oftentimes your mom had to go and get extra work because your dad didn't have a check. Or if your dad was striking, it often meant that the whole family went hungry or didn't have enough to eat because there was now no money in the house. Or if your dad was striking, it meant that the whole family sacrificed. And sometimes there wasn't electricity because there was no money to pay the electricity bill. And so the freedom struggle, any freedom struggle, it's never just the people who are participating in the protest or the strike. It's always the whole family unit is affected by the choices that people are making to stand up and fight for what is right. And sometimes you've just got to make the hard choice to stand up and to be the only one. Sometimes you've got to make the hard choice to stand up, to speak and say what's right, even if you are the only one. So I want you to notice this picture. Pay attention to this picture. First of all, it's a white man in 1968 in Memphis, and he's the only one on the strike line that day. He's the only one on the picket line striking that day. Never forget his name. His name was Tommy Moore. He was a union worker. And sometimes nature has a way of reflecting what's happening in our world. So what happened in March 22nd, 1968, Dr. King said, I'm coming to Memphis. I'm going to march with the sanitation workers on March 22nd, 1968. At the same time, Dr. King had threats on his life. People were threatening his life. They were calling his home, telling his wife, your husband's going to die, telling his wife, we're going to kill that Negro. It was a very stressful time for him. And yet he said, I'm going to Memphis and I'm going to march with the sanitation workers. I know there's a hit on my life, but I'm still going to go to Memphis and I'm march. And then what happens? At the very beginning of spring in Memphis, y'all, where winter is never, you never get higher than 45 degrees in Memphis. At the beginning of spring, you get 16 inches of snow. You get a snowstorm at the beginning of spring on the very day that Dr. King said he was going to come to Memphis and march with the sanitation workers. That was, in my opinion, that was nature winking at the devastation of what was to come. That was nature winking at the devastation of what was going to happen. It was a bad sign. It was an omen. And so I'm going to read for you my haiku called Omen. And it begins like this. It says, yellow daffodils, 16 inches under snow. King canceled his march. Now you would say, why were there no black men out there marching with Tommy Moore? One of the reasons, because I've researched this. So one of the reasons is many of those sanitation workers, they had shoes with holes in the bottom of them. And so they didn't have the right, what would I say? The right clothing for the weather. They didn't have the right shoes for the weather. And Tommy Moore said that, hey, you can't, but I can. So what was his battle cry? His battle cry was, do right, Mr. Mayor. And he was also willing to stand alone. And so my question to you is, what is your battle cry? When you look around the world and you see what's happening, and you look around the world and you see what's not right, what is your battle cry? And are you, even if none of your friends are not speaking up for what's right, are you willing to stand alone, to use your voice and to speak up for what is correct? All right, and so now I come to another poem in my book, and it's called The King is Dead. And this is written from the perspective of Lorraine Jackson. Now, what happens when she writes this book, when she writes this poem, is that during the strike, Dr. King finally made it to Memphis on March 28th. And the protest, which started out nonviolent, there were some riotous people who came and turned the peaceful protest into a riot. And when the people did that, they said it's the young people, but that has not been proven yet. But when it was turned into a riot, the police began to beat the nonviolent people and take them to jail. And Dr. King turned very fearful. It was the first time in his career that one of his nonviolent protests had actually turned into a riot. And so a stranger comes and scoops him up out of the crowd, and they take him back to a hotel. And when they do that, the media says that Dr. King is a coward, and they belittle him. He's vilified for running away, but he was frightened, and there were threats on his life, y'all. So he didn't know if this was the moment that he was about to die. So yes, he ran away. But when he got back home to Atlanta, he said, I'm coming back to Memphis. I won't let this be my last time in Memphis. I'm coming back, and I'm determined to have a peaceful strike or a peaceful protest. And so the day he wants to come back to have that peaceful protest is April the 8th. And so he comes to Memphis on April the 3rd to plan for the protest. And then on April the 4th, when he's getting ready to be with his friends so that they can strategize about this protest, while he's standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, that's when a sniper shoots him and he's assassinated, and Dr. King is killed. And in America, there are like over 100 cities that just start to burn. People take to the streets in their anguish, in their devastation, in their sadness, because a riot is the voice of the voiceless, is what Dr. King said. That is what a riot oftentimes a riot is the voice of the voiceless, unless it was like last week. That was not the voice of the voiceless that we saw last week. That was bedevilment. Okay, but that's another conversation. Okay, so here's the poem, The King is Dead. And if you would, repeat after me so that you can hear yourself read the poem. The king is dead. Not long ago, there lived a king. He did not sleep in a castle. He did not wear a crown. He did not rule a royal court or ride in chariots. The king marched in the street. He lived to help the poor. He lived for peace and love. Hate, kill the king. Hate, kill the king. The king is dead. Hate, kill the king. The king is dead. What will the people do? Hate, kill the king. The king is dead. What will the people do? Is Harriet Tubman here? No, Harriet Tubman is not here. Harriet Tubman is dead. Is Martin Luther King here? No, Martin Luther King is not here. Martin Luther King is dead. Is Sojourner Truth here? No, Sojourner Truth is not here. Sojourner Truth is dead. Is Ralph Bunche here? Nope, Ralph Bunche is not here. He's dead. Toni Morrison here? Toni Morrison not here. Gwendolyn Brooks here? Gwendolyn Brooks not here. Paul Laurence Dunbar here? Paul Laurence Dunbar not here. Okay. Name any of your champions who are no longer living with us. They are not here. It says, what will the people do? Who's here? You are here. I'm here. Your mom's here, your dad's here. We are the living and we are here. And so the question remains, what will we now do? What will now be our battle cry? How will we stand to use our voice? I'm not marching in the streets because that's not my gift. That's not my talent. What has God given me to do? God has given me to write books. So I'm writing books. I'm writing a book about voter intimidation. I'm writing a new book about Coretta Scott King. I'm writing a new book about the Mississippi Delta Blues. That's what God has given me to do. He has given me to look for those histories that need to be remembered, and I'm writing about those histories. Nobody up until the time that I wrote this picture book, nobody had written a picture book for children about the assassination of Dr. King. Nobody. But I saw a need. I saw where my voice was needed. And so I took it upon myself. It took me 15 years. It took me 15 years to write this book. But I kept on writing it. I wrote the book about seven different forms. And I kept on writing until I got it right. So is Martin here? No. Is Harriet here? No. Is Martin here? No. But who's here? You are here. And so now it's your task to decide, what will you do for freedom, for justice, for all? So I don't know what our time is like. Alexandra, what's my time like?
You have about 20 minutes.
Okay, all right, great. All right, so I want to talk a minute about miracles, and I want to talk a minute about your friends, and I want to talk a minute about where you're born, and I want to talk a minute about who your sister is and your brother is and who your neighbors are and where you grow up and what school you go to and who those teachers are that you have. I want you to understand that you have been purposed intentionally where you are, in the family that you're born in the neighborhood that you're born in, with the privilege and the power that you have, with the personal agency that you have. You have been purposed here, packaged here for a purpose, for a reason that is beyond just your own personal ambition, right? And so the way I know that to be true is when I look at Dr. King's life, he left himself open up to miracles and chance encounters. Look at the first picture here. That's President Kennedy and President Johnson. In 1960, when when Kennedy was running for president against Nixon, everybody, all the polls, if we're going to talk about polls, all the polls said that Nixon was going to win, and that Kennedy would not be winning president because he was a Catholic, and very seldom there had not been a Catholic president. We got new Catholic president coming up this week, right? And so it was like, oh, Nixon is going to win. If Black people were voting, oftentimes Black people were voting for the Republican Party because they were the party of Lincoln. And so Dr. King, his daddy, nobody had put their hat on Kennedy. They wanted each candidate to come to African Americans and discuss, look, what policies for civil rights are you going to do? Nixon said, I ain't talking to you, King. I ain't got nothing to say to you. And then something happens. Dr. King gets stopped, y'all. This is a miracle. This is a miracle. Dr. King gets stopped for driving with an Alabama license in Georgia. When the police stop him, they say, hey, you're in Georgia and you have an Alabama license. We're sending you to the penitentiary, to the Reedsville Penitentiary. Now, the Reedsville Penitentiary is where hardened criminals go, for criminals who have robbed and killed and maimed people. You do not go to the penitentiary for driving with an out-of-state license. But they sent some egregious and nefarious policemen arranged to send King to the Reedsville Penitentiary because he's driving with the wrong license, because he had just moved and he had not had time to change license because he was so involved in the movement. So when he goes to the Reedsville Penitentiary, his wife Coretta is several months pregnant. She is out of her wits. She does not know what to do. And John Kennedy, his brother Robert, said, you know what? we heard that your husband, they called Coretta. They said, we heard that your husband is at the penitentiary and about to be put on the chain gang. And she's like, yes, can you help me? They're like, absolutely, we can. We will help you. They call the governor of Georgia. The governor gets Dr. King released. He's now released under his own recognizance. He can go back home. He can be with his family. Well, when they do that, Kennedy says, is there anything else I can help you with, King? And King says, yes, let's talk about the civil rights reform. He says, I'm open to that. Once he helps to get King set free from the penitentiary, and Kennedy says, I'm open to discuss civil rights reform, because Nixon had not been open to any conversation. And when Nixon discovered that King was at the Reedsville Penitentiary, he didn't do jack to try to save King. And Dr. King and his dad had been staunch Republicans. All right. So when King then puts his support behind Kennedy, and Daddy King, who is big in the Baptist convention, puts his support behind Kennedy, Kennedy wins the election, y'all, by a fraction of a hair. And a lot of historians say it's because King put his weight behind Kennedy during the 1960 election, which changes the whole course of time, right? Because then Kennedy is assassinated, Johnson becomes president, and it's Johnson who signs the 1964 Civil Rights Act. All right. Now, miracles and wonders, signs, miracles and wonders, chance encounters. Reverend James Lawson meets King in 1955, the year of the Montgomery bus boycott. And then in 68, a decade later, it's James Lawson who says, nobody was listening to the sanitation workers in Memphis until they called on King, and King added his voice. Because this is what's powerful about Dr. King. What's powerful about Dr. King is every time he added his voice to a movement, the movement prevailed. Dr. King is not the architect of the movement. Dr. King was not the architect of the Montgomery bus boycott. Dr. King was not the architect of Selma. Dr. King was not the architect of the Birmingham Children Crusade. Dr. King was not the architect of the March on Washington. But every time he added his voice to the movement, it prevailed. So what does James Lawson say? When everybody in 1968 are ignoring the sanitation workers in their labor strike, James Lawson says, if I invite King to Memphis, this will change the dynamic, and this will allow those sanitation workers to be heard. And true enough, once King comes to Memphis, then the New York Times is reporting on the sanitation strike, right? Newspapers all over the nation are now reporting on the sanitation strike. And the reason King feels a urge to go is because King is now on his way to Washington to fight for a living wage for all Americans. So the sanitation strike, like the Good Samaritan that helps the man on the Jericho Road, the sanitation strike is King being a Good Samaritan, helping the wounded on the Jericho Road. And he stops in Memphis, y'all. He stops in Memphis because James Lawson called him to Memphis. And so this is where the sacrifice is made. The prophet is killed, but the movement prevails, right? It's a sad ending, but it's a triumphant ending too, because once King is killed, the sanitation workers said, we will not let his life go in vain, and they continue to march until they prevail in their strike. And then lastly, I want to talk about the miracle of Martin and Coretta. You do not have this Martin Luther King that haunted my imagination, this Martin Luther King that haunts your imagination, this Martin Luther King that you feel is this like mythological conqueror that could solve all, do all, win all, had the courage of a giant, this conqueror who was only 5'7", right? The reason why you feel so intimate, and why you also feel like you know King and he is your friend, and that he haunts your imagination even 50 years later, is because he had a wife named Coretta Scott King. And the 2 months after King is killed, she dedicates her life to making sure that no one forgets his name. She dedicates her life. Look, 6 months after he's killed, she proposes to Conyers, the congressman in Detroit. She says, hey, I need you to go to Washington and propose that they make my husband's birthday a holiday. This is 6 months. She already has a plan that she is not going to let his blood be sacrificed in vain. And so this Dr. King that you know, this Dr. King that has been elevated and lifted high, was vilified and viewed as a villain when he died. But because of his miraculous encounter in 1951 in Boston with Coretta Scott King, who ultimately becomes his wife, we can now never, and we will never forget his name, and we will never forget what he has contributed to social justice, not only in America, but as a Nobel Peace Prize winner, that he has contributed to social justice internationally. And so what I want you to remember about your own life, your life is a miracle. And where you are right now, the connections that you are making with friends and teachers and loved ones, you have teachers right now who will influence the trajectory of your life. You have parents right now who will influence the trajectory of your life. You have friends who will be your cohorts on matters that concern justice and things that are right. And so never devalue where you are, never devalue what you have, or never devalue what you don't have. Always be striving and reaching for more, but understand that who you are right now is enough, and what you have right now is enough, and that everything that you need to be successful has already been implanted. It was given to you. It's been made into your DNA. You have everything that you don't need new tennis shoes to be successful. Who you are and what you're going to do, it's already in your somebodyness, and your greatness is already in your DNA to be the marvelous person that God has created you to be. Remember, you are the gift, you are the blessing, you are the one who makes dreams happen. And so what has happened with us? We are dream reapers and we are dream keepers. Dr. King had a dream, right? He died, but we've now reaped the dream. We are dream reapers. His legacy is his dream, his vision of a beloved community. So we're dream reapers in that regard, but then also we're dream keepers. Because if freedom is going to remain, if we are going to have freedom in America, then you've got to make sure to keep the dream alive and to make justice. If you look around and one of your friends is not being successful and not having a good time at life, then you take on the issues of your brother and you try to help them as best you can, right? And so you've got to be, now that you are a dream, you've got to be a dream keeper, helping to keep not only the dream alive, but helping the dream thrive and survive. I hope I'm making sense. Am I making sense? I know y'all young, but I just hope I'm making sense, Jesus. All right, and so now our evening affirmation. This is also in my Memphis, Martin, and Mountaintop book. Repeat after me. Dream big, walk tall, be strong, march on. Don't quit, never stop, climb up the mountaintop. Dream big, walk tall, be strong, march on. Don't quit, never stop, climb up the mountaintop. And what is that Dr. King said? He said, look, he said, I've made it up here to the mountaintop, but I don't know if I'm going to get to the promised land. And so it's your task to cross over into the promised land. Now, everybody got paper and pencil? How many more minutes do we got now? Alexandra?
We have about 15 minutes.
All right, cool. So with that, I need everybody to pull out their paper and pencil, and I need you to get the name of that person. Remember, we talked about the name of that person that was inspirational to you, that encourages you, that loves you. Now, I want you to think about your favorite gift. The most spectacular gift you've ever received. I want you to think about that gift. If it's a toy, guess what? Toys can be broken, right? If it's a phone, guess what? Phones become obsolete. If it's a flower, guess what? Flowers fade.
Thank you.
But poetry lasts forever. So I want you to remember this about poetry. When it comes to giving gifts, you're always like, well, I need some money. You don't need any money. Do you know how to write? Do you have the facility with words and language? If you do, that is the lasting gift to offer to your mom, to your dad, to your grandma, to your teacher, to your friend, to people who have done something important to you. Make it a habit. Try to. You say, well, I'm not good at writing poetry. Can you speak? Can you talk? Do you have a collection of words at your disposal? You're good at writing poetry. So it says here, when is poetry the perfect gift? Every holiday, any birthday, Monday through Sunday, just because. Now I had you to name 2 people. And so you can pick one of those people. And what I want you to do, I know Alexandra had said we were going to do a haiku, and the haiku was my plan, but then I thought I had a better plan. I thought, why don't we do an acrostic, right? And so an acrostic is when you have one word and the line of each word is a description of that word or that person, okay? So I wrote an acrostic as your example. And I'm celebrating my mom. I'm my mom's only child. My mom had one child. I'm it. Okay. God bless her heart. I'm so sorry for her. But I love her to death, and she has loved me to death or to life. I love her to life, and she's loved me to life. And so I wrote my poem about my mom because she has encouraged me to write since I was that 3rd grader who thought she knew Dr. King. And so my poem says, Mama, you are love and light and laughter. Mama, you are gladness and grace when the sun don't shine. So now look at my description there. It says, write your name word vertically. The name of that person. Is it your mom? Is it your dad? Is it your teacher? Is their first name like short enough that maybe you can do something with that? And then number 2, start each line with words or statements that describe your person. That should be start each line with words or statements that describe your person. Rhyming is not required. Include one or more, several, and I don't know what I was thinking there. Include several visual images. So the image in my poem is light. The image in my poem is someone laughing. And the image in my poem is a sunshine, right? So include things that you can see visually in your mind, or words that appeal to your senses as you write about your person. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 4 minutes to write your poem. I'm going to play a song by Joe Sample. It's called Spellbound. And it's going to give you 4 minutes to think, brainstorm, and come up with your poem. And then you will have your poem. And what I want you to do is I want you to take your poem, and I want you to, if your person lives out of town or lives far away, I want you to take your poem, write it neatly once you get through with that first draft. And then I want you to mail it to the person. And now take this time to do your writing and think about what you want to say. All right. So, was that enough time for you all to think about your ideas and get your creative juices flowing? All right. I pray that it was. So now look, gang, that brings me to, I thank you all for coming and participating. That brings me to the end of my time. If you notice there, these are other books that I've written. If you know someone who's about to have a baby, I recommend that you get my book, Honey Baby Sugar Child. If you know someone who is being raised by their, this is Honey Baby Sugar Child. If you know a child who's being raised by their grandmother, their aunt, their big sister, or adopted, living in foster care, I recommend this book, Just Like a Mama. All right. And then if you know a child who loves poetry, I recommend my book, A Song for Gwendolyn Brooks, which is about the life and times of Gwendolyn Brooks. On there, on my final quote, freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. Remember that this generation now requires your voice. But also, before I leave, I want to read a poem from Eloise Greenfield. And the poem is called Things, and it's about poetry. And it says this: went to the corner, walked in the store, bought me some candy, ain't got it no more, ain't got it no more. Went to the beach, played on the shore, built me a sand house, ain't got it no more, ain't got it no more. Went to the kitchen, sat on the floor, wrote me a poem. I say, I went to the kitchen, sat on the floor and wrote me a poem. I wrote me a poem, still got it, still got it. Today you wrote your poem. Guess what? You'll always have it. The person that you gifted to, they'll always have it. It'll never fade. It will never melt. It will never be broken. It is always perfect. God bless you, as you are always perfect. God bless you.
Everybody give Miss Faye a nice clap for this incredible workshop. I hope you all had such a good time.
Amazing.
Hey,
Thank you. Wonderful. Yes, wonderful.
Yay!
That
Thank
was
you.
really
Will buy the book and check out the book for yourself, and also keep up with Miss Faye. For those of you interested, this will be available via YouTube in the coming days. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you all enjoyed our day-long series of public programs around Martin Luther King. We hope that you celebrate his life, his legacy, and his work, and that you and your family are well during this time. We look forward to welcoming you back to CAM, hopefully sooner than later. In the meantime, please do check out our upcoming family programs and workshops via CAM online and our website, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great day, everybody. Be safe.
thank
Bye-bye.
you. God bless you all.